Hello guys, and welcome back to Joe's Ventures, and today we're doing another episode of our Planet Zoo mod spotlights. This time we're doing part 62. I know everyone's quite enjoying these ones, especially when we got some whales going on. We got, instead of not one, but not two, but three whales in this one. But before we get into that, we're going to have a look at some fishes and some other ungulates. So, really interesting group of animals today. So we're going to be starting off with this little guy. We have got the common rudd. So a really cool little fish that we got here. Let's see if we can find him. A little bit hard to find since they are quite small, but there we are. This is the common rudd done by Leaf and Buff Zoo, like most of the aquatic animals are at the moment. So a really cute little guy here. So these guys are a bethnopelagic fish. Freshwater fish, so that means they live in kind of like deep and open freshwater, and they typically are found from Europe to Middle Asia, and they're found around the bases of the North, Baltic, Black, Caspian, and Aral seas. So they're quite similar to roaches, but they cannot be identified. Kind of the main difference is that these common roaches have a big red spot on top of their pupil. And there's some other minor differences that you can keep them apart. And also a variety of these guys called the golden rudd, which is kept a lot in ponds for people to like them, which is kind of get that gold color. I think this might actually be kind of a gold rudd kind of style. Really beautiful little guy. And in terms of size, they can grow about 45 to 50 centimeters in length. That's kind of their big size, and they average about 25 centimeters. So it's a decent sized fish, definitely very good size. And their name comes from the kind of like they have greyish fins with a reddish tint you see here, and the colour of the fins is kind of like a rudd. That's where they get the name rudd refers to, which is the colouring of these fins here. That's where they get that name, and really cool. And in terms of their introduced range, they've been introduced into the United States, Ireland, Morocco, Norway, Canada, Spain, New Zealand, Tunisia, and have also been found in a bunch of US states such as like Alabama, Arkansas, Colorado, Alabama, Texas, Virginia, Wisconsin, and the list can go on. Though that may not list might actually include all the states that have rudd, but they're also illegally introduced in New Zealand in the 1960s and have become very, very bad invasive species, similar to things like trout, and wherever they're introduced through, of course, of an endangered invasive species. And they were reported in the United States at least as early as 1925, and it's illegal to possess them without permission, of course. And in terms of their ecology, they tend to prefer warm, water-rich and plants as they feed on aquatic vegetation when the temperature exceeds 18 degrees Celsius. They also hunt for living prey in the upper levels, but they prefer mesotrophic waters. And that means while the roach is sometimes found together with perch and water, they're nutripore. And they also prefer non-acidic water. They prefer shallow, weedy areas in lakes and river backwaters, with females laying up to 200,000 eggs on submerged vegetation. With these young rudd, they'll eat on zooplankton, aquatic insects, and occasionally on small fish. And when they become mature, and they weigh about 18 inches and 3 pounds, they will eat mostly vegetation, and the rudd can consume up to 40% of its body weight in vegetation in a day, and much as 80 of which is discarded as waste, which releases nutrients back into the water column. And they can also tolerate a wide range of temperatures. That's part of the reason why they're so invasive. And they also include eutrophic and polluted waters, so they can do well in places like that. And they've also been shown in labs to hybridize with the golden shiner, and come in these colors and can be sold as pool ornaments. In terms of their lifespan, the maximum lifespan has been reported at 17 years, while sexual maturity has been reported at 2 to 3 years age. So they're quite a long-lived fish. Really cool guys here, also done by Leaf and Buff Zoo. And now we're going to move on from kind of a rudd to a carp, and we've got a cool little carp here. So this is also done by Leaf and Buff Zoo. We have the Caucasian carp, I believe how you pronounce it, or the Hurricane, or something like that. Let's see if we can find them there. Look at these wonderful little guys. So these guys are a medium-sized member of the carp family, and they're typically found in Northern Europe. And the name actually derives from a Low German word, Kazur or Kazutzi, and potentially from the medieval Latin Conocurus, which is a kind of riverfish, which is pretty cool. These guys are typically found across Europe. They can be found from England to Russia, and as far north as the Arctic Circle and the Scandinavian countries, and as far south as central France and the Black Sea, where they typically live in lakes, ponds, and slow-moving rivers. And they've actually been established. It has been established that the fish are actually native to Europe and not introduced, so that's good. These guys are a medium-sized carp. They get about 15 centimeters in body length. And they really exceed the weight of over 2 kilograms, but a maximum size weight for these guys is 64 centimeters have been reported in males, and the heaviest published weight is about 3 kilograms. And they've broadly described as having these like golden green shining colors and gold bronze as well, but they're darker in maturity, so typically you get like dark green or deep bronze colors on their bodies. And there actually has been reports of hybridization between these guys and domestic and feral goldfish, though it's very hard to verify, which has been verified by laboratory conditions, though we don't really know if they're wild ones. And they actually seem to possess hybrid vigor. That means they are more adept at finding food and evading predators than their parents. So that means they could include a possible threat to the native populations, because they could actually, these hybrids could potentially outcompete the carp, which is not good. And while the variation in the shape of the carp is very high, in places where predatory fish are present, they tend to have a more sleek form to a deep body form, which makes predators makes it difficult for predator fish to fit the carp in their jaws. However, when this deep bodied morphology is not permanent, and it's a trait that's actually, they can kind of change their bodies and be like more flat or thin depending on what areas they live in, which is very, very interesting. And in terms of their physiology, these guys are pretty remarkable. They can live in pretty much entirely anoxic conditions, and it can survive in like with anaerobic respiration in certain periods, also with like ethanol and things like that. And they've also seems to be like, unlike other vertebrates, they can like produce ethanol as well. They also may survive in anoxic conditions. And they can also, the winter phenotype can also sustain fertilization and as a substitute for fermentation as a substitute of respiration. So they basically let themselves rot to survive. So that's pretty interesting. And in terms of sport fishing, these guys can be caught on a rod and things like that. And the biggest ones are typically like 4 pounds, 9 ounces. And there have been hybrids found, things like that. And really cool. And in terms of their use, they're often kept as a freshwater fish in gardens since they're pretty adaptable. They're also heavily farmed fish because of obviously people eat carp as well, and being able to live in so many different conditions, they can be farmed pretty regularly. Pretty cool fish. I do like these carps, also done by Leaf and Buffsu. Now we're going to move on to some deep sea fish, or some saltwater fish. We have got the black drum, also known as the drum or the drummer, also done by Leaf and Buffsu. Really interesting little fish here. So these guys are typically related to the red drum, even though they're not red. They're related to these guys. And they typically found to be between 5 and 30 pounds, or 2 to 14 kilos. And they're well known for being the largest of the drum family, with some specimens getting up to 40 kilograms or 90 pounds, and the world record black drum was just over 51 kilos or 113 pounds. And they're often considered black and grey in colour, with the juvenile form having these black bands, which kind of become more grey over the as they age. And they have these rounded teeth that are specialised for eating oysters and crunching other shellfish up. And they're actually capable of producing tones between 100 and 500 hertz, so they perform these mating calls. These guys are usually found near brackish waters with large older fish, normally found in salty areas of an estuary, near oyster beds and things like that, with juvenile fish having these kind of small bands as well, and they're often mistaken for sheep's shed fish, but they can be distinguished because of the chin barbules that you can see on these adults here. They usually, the stripes that the babies had will usually fade when they grow up to like 30 to 61 centimeters as they grow into that. And juvenile fish are typically found in less salty areas and relate more strongly to colour as well. And in the Western Atlantic, the black drum can be found from Nova Scotia to Florida, the Gulf of Mexico, uncommonly in the Antilles and the southern Caribbean coast. and from the Okavango Delta, not Okavango, Orinoco Delta in Argentina. So they're quite wide-ranging fish, and they're considered least concern because of that. As a larval stage, they typically feed on zooplankton, and young drums also feed on worms and small fish. But as they are mostly bottom feeders, the adults eat mostly mollusks and crabs as they get bigger, so it's kind of like niche petitioning going on, where they have these big teeth and they use these bubbles to sense out these hard shell fish, and then they crush them with their big jaws, which is pretty interesting. And they typically take 1 to 3 years to... from 1 to 3 years, it kind of is 150 millimeters per year, and then slows down from ages 10 to 20 to about 50 millimeters a year. And there's been studies reported that more than 60 kgs on the Atlantic coast is believed to live up to 60 years. And its other studies suggest that black drums in the Gulf of Mexico do not grow that large because they don't live that long. And the longest individual, or the largest individual, was 22 kilos, and the oldest was 44 years old. So typically in relation to that. So these guys are bottom feeders, so they're most commonly caught with bait that are like bottom or suspended within a couple feet of the bottom. And they usually use that to try and... Also, shrimps and a porter bait squid can be used as well, but it's not as common. And they often try to use crab and things. And these guys also are considered edible, but they have a moderate flavour and they're not oily. And some restaurants will serve smaller black drum, and black drum can be a challenge to clean because they have a lot of these large scales that can be hard to remove. And fish over 15 pounds, or 6.8 kilograms, can become tough and have the consistency comparable to chicken, rather than the flaky texture that most fish have. And the younger fish are often indistinguishable in flavour from their relative, the red drum. So yeah, really cool to see these guys. Very interesting fish. Now we're going to move on to the permit. So, not the permit that's the kind you need to get from the government, but the fish. Also done by Leif and Buffsu. We have got here these wonderful guys. So this is a game fish that's found in the Western Atlantic Ocean, and these guys typically feed on crabs, shrimps, and smaller fish. They're pretty generalist in that extent. So they're generally told apart by these elongated dorsal and anal fins, and they're kind of shaped like a scythe with their dorsal fin. And they're quite compressed laterally. That means they're quite tall, as you can see here, and they appears tall and thin by looking at them from the front, as you can see there. And the average permit has 6 to 7 dorsal spines and 18 to 21 soft rays. And they actually have no scutes, and they also have a large orange-yellow patch on their abdomens, while the rest of their body is pretty dark, or greyish. In terms of the size, they can reach a maximum length of 48 inches, or 122 centimeters, and weigh up to 79 pounds and 36 kilograms, so quite big. They're also usually followed or found in shallow tropical water, such as mudflats, channels with muddy bottoms and all that. And although permits have been found close to shore, even in more brackish areas, they spawn offshore. And the young are usually found in like the surf, where there's smaller vertebrates for them to eat. And they can also be found in the Western Ocean from Massachusetts to Brazil, and including most of the Caribbean islands. And they actually got their name because the USS Permit, which was 2 submarines that were in the United States Navy, and on it, in keeping with the denizens of the deep theme that they prevailed with the naming of the USS Los Angeles. So they're kind of named after a submarine. Pretty cool. Wonderful guys here. Just make sure it's not raining. Wonderful fish, also done by Leif and Buffsu. And now we're going to move on to, from the fish, we've got some cool ungulates going on. So we are going from the red Hartebeest, done by Leif and Mark, M-A-R-C. And have a look at these wonderful guys here. So this is the red Hartebeest, which is a subspecies or species of Hartebeest, depending on who you ask. And these guys are from southern Africa, and more than 130,000 individuals live in the wild. And they are closely related to the topay or the Tsembe. These guys are a large African antelope and are one of 10 subspecies, with this guy sometimes being treated as its own species. And they're known as the red Hartebeest, and they're the most colourful. And where they get these names because they're quite reddish, with these, also got these black markings on their legs as well, as you can see here. Really wonderful, and they look quite reddish. The average weight for these guys is, the average weight for a male is about 150 kilograms, and females weigh about 120 kilograms. The average shoulder height is about 135 centimeters, but their horn's about 60 centimeters long, and they can live up to 19 years, believe it or not. And they have a little sexual dimorphism, so the males and females don't really look too different from each other than like some slight differences in body size, males being slightly bigger. And it's also, however, they have more extreme horns in males as well. That's kind of really the only difference is the size in that. And they also have an excellent sense of smell, and they are able to hear very well, and though their sight is poor. And when alarmed, they can reach a maximum speed of 55 kilometers an hour, and they use a zigzag pattern as they run away to try and evade predators. So in terms of their gestation period, they have a gestation period of about 8 months, and they give birth to a single calf. They typically give birth when the summer rains begins, and after birth, the babies are hidden in dense vegetation, where they grow up and join a group to improve their chance of being to survive from predators, since they are weak. And then most females will begin breeding at the age of 2 and can conceive from 9 to 10 months after giving birth. So in terms of their diet, these guys are typically grass feeders, so they have these long snouts that kind of show that, which gives them the advantage to better crop and masticate or chew up their food better. And they mainly feed on these kind of grasses, and their diet typically fluctuates a lot seasonally. They'll typically eat whatever grass is most common at the time. And they seem to consume higher quality green grass in the wet season and lower quality stuff in the dry seasons. And they're also less water dependent than most of their relatives, so they only need to drink when melons or tubers are inaccessible. So they tend to collect a lot of their food, a lot of their water from their food. And in terms of their predators, they are preyed upon by animals such as lions, spotted hyenas, leopards, and cheetahs, though they're not really a common food source for all these species because they are quite able to run away and defend themselves. Though lions only consume hartebeest about 7% of their diet, and cheetahs as 1.5%. And leopards consider these guys about 6.2.5% of their diets. And lions are typically prey on the adult males, but both spotted and hyenas and leopards tend to prey on the younger ones. And their predatory habits are likely to these guys as they're quite nomadic, so they tend to move around a lot, so they're just not often in the same area sometimes, so they're not really common in their diets. And in terms of environmental threats, they have always been considered an issue with rural areas, and since little enforcement of these laws are possible, there's no regulated, and it's also believed to be hunting hartebeest is also kind of an ancient practice of persistent hunting, where they hunt in the middle of the day. It's believed to be how humans hunted before we obviously used guns and such. And they often chase them until the animal tires, and they kill it with spears and things. So the red hartebeest is typically found in southwestern Africa, and typically found in like that southern areas. While there's obviously other subspecies that live across the place as well. And most of these guys are nomadic, so they pretty much move around where they can find stuff. And they typically are found in the plains and scrublands of the sub-Saharan African climate, so they like it. And yeah, really, really cool. So this is one of the subspecies or species of hartebeest. And to compare these guys, also done by Leek and Mac, we've got another subspecies. These guys are the Luel hartebeest. So not too dissimilar. These guys are considered also known as the Jackson's hartebeest. They're native to Central Africa, so while the red hartebeest was related to as this lives in like Southern Africa or Southeastern Africa, these guys tend to live in Central Africa. So they found in Chad, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Ethiopia, Kenya, Sudan, Tanzania, and Uganda. And they're actually known to hybridize with the other subspecies of hartebeest, but they are generally just quite doing their own thing. And there's very interesting stuff. They're also endangered as well, which kind of sucks. There are often big issues there. It's kind of bushmeat, habitat degradation, something like that. But a really, really nice like comparison. You can see the difference between the different subspecies. This is kind of like the Central African hartebeest, and this is your more commonly seen red hartebeest, because lots of safaris happen in South Africa. So really, really wonderful animals here. Good comparison. And now we're going to be moving finally onto our whales. So when I'm not going to discuss the particular species here because it's kind of mixed up here, but we've got ourselves a right whale, and there's 3 different species of right whale. The one in Endless Ocean is labeled as a North Atlantic right whale, but Leaf kind of, when he made it, he considered it a southern right whale, so we're just going to talk about all 3 different species. So these guys are 3 different species of right whale. There is the North Atlantic right whale, the North Pacific right whale, and the southern right whale, and they're all pretty similar to each other. They have these like V-shaped bodies. They're really, really interesting looking animals. Let's see if we can get a good look at this one here. Really, really beautiful, if I do say so myself. These guys have V-shaped blowholes that are like dark grey, and then they have black skin. And they also have these rough patches on their face where lots of lice tends to live, whale lice. And they get pretty big. They can grow up to more than 18 meters long, or 59 feet, with the highest recorded length of about 19.8 meters, or 65 feet. They also are very robust whales. They're one of the heaviest whales. They can get up to 100 short tons, or about 91 tons, or 89 long tons, with the largest known right whales getting about 20.7 meters, or 28 feet long, and lengths of up to 135 can get up to 135,000 kilograms, or 2,098,000 pounds. So very big, almost as big as your big blue whale. But on average, they kind of get about 21 and 150 kilograms. The big specimens have been seen about 21.3 meters and 150,000 kilograms, or 330,000 pounds. But they were documented during whaling, but it's not really considered accurate just because it's not the highest level of accuracy sometimes with whaler reports and things like that. Let's see if we can find another one. Oh, you're stuck in the corner there. Let's see if we can find another whale. Damn it. Really beautiful, if I do say so myself, but these guys, the immense bulk means they're significantly heavier than whales of the same length, like humpbacks, greys, and things like that. And they actually are only just behind the blue whale in mass, so they're quite big. And they get the name the right whale, is because when whaling was in its height, they were considered the right whale to kill because they lived close to shore. Their baleen was very useful for lots of commercial things, and they were just didn't really fight back. And they also have a lot of oil in them, which means obviously that's what the whalers wanted. And all 3 species of these guys are migratory, so they move seasonally to give birth. So they typically move down or up, considering what species it is, into the tropics. So typically the southern right whale will come down from subantarctic to Antarctic waters up into the equator, and the North Atlantic and the North Pacific ones will come down into the tropical Pacific and mid-Atlantic to breed. And in the northern hemisphere, they tend to avoid open waters and stay close to peninsulas and bays. But while the southern ones are a little bit more adventurous, they tend to avoid these areas. They also, which is believed to also give them shelter and lots of food, because that's a lot of where their food kind of lives. And southern whales will feed far offshore in the summer, but large populations will also occur in near shore in the winter. And right whales typically feed on animals like copepods, but they will also eat krill and pteropods, which are lots of small invertebrates, so that they will, since they're not really a lunge feeder like a fin whale or a blue whale, they typically just strain lots of water through their mouths and typically just let it filter through, and all these copepods and krills and things will just flow into their mouths, which is very interesting. And one little fact about them, they have the largest testicles of any whale, and they can weigh up to a ton, so that's a lot. So they also forage around the surface, underwater, and even on the ocean bottom. And during courtship, the males will gather into large groups, and they will compete for a single female. And it's just that sperm competition is a very important factor in their mating. And although the blue whale is the largest animal on the planet, these guys have their largest testes, as I mentioned. They could be 10 times as large as a blue whale's testes. And the gestation period for these guys lasts about a year, with babies being born at a ton, or like a little under about a ton. And they're about 4 to 6 meters long, or 30 to 20 feet in length at birth, and they will wean off their mother about 8 months old. The reason white whales is, as I mentioned, they were tend to hang out at the surface a lot. They're docile, and that means they stay close to the coast, and they have a high blubber content, which made them perfect. And sadly, out of all the great whales, the North Atlantic and the North Pacific right whales are among the most endangered and are both protected. And it's believed that the North Atlantic whales are actually critically endangered, being less than like 300 or 400 whales, and it's believed they could potentially not be sustainable, so they could be functionally extinct, which is very, very sad. And the North Pacific population is also endangered, and they have two surviving populations, with the Western Pacific population being a little over 1,000 individuals, and the Eastern North Pacific population being about fewer than 50, so that means they could potentially be critically endangered, that population itself. But the one that did the best is the southern right whale, and the populations are believed to be a few thousand, and they are the southern right whales have recovered pretty well from whaling, but the other North Atlantic and North Pacific right whales are kind of struggling, in fact, which is really bad. And obviously they were probably the species of whales hardest hit by whaling, and kind of makes sense that they're pretty endangered, since as they got their name, the right whale, because they were obviously the right whale to kill. I wonder if this whale's doing okay. I think. Oh, we'll just follow these guys. But yeah, although they no longer face these pressures, there's also a lot of other things that they can get killed by, including like strikes by ships. They get entangled in fishing gear, and also they eat a lot of plastic and other marine debris, which can be very, very bad for them. I want to see if we can fix up this whale, and it affects pretty much all these species, though not nearly as. I think he's kind of stuck there. Let's see if we can fix him. Box all animals over here. So they should all be there. We'll watch them have a swim. But yeah, sadly they can get affected by that. The North Atlantic right population is estimated to be about 411 in 2017, and went down to 451, which is really bad. And it seems like they're just not doing too well right now, which really sucks. But in 2017, at least 118 right whales were seen in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, which is currently a quarter of that local population. And it seems that they may be trying to fix concerns with these guys migrating, because they don't want to interrupt with ship lanes, because they often get hit by ships. So there's lots of really good conservation work going into these guys. I think it must be... Oh, this guy must have escaped. Whatever. But yeah, really interesting whales, and I really hope the North Atlantic and the North Pacific species make a good recovery, as we all wish they do. So now, that was also done by Leaf and Buffsu. He's done a few whales. Next we're going to move on to our second whale. There's no reason to feel grey or blue, but we have got the grey whale. Really wonderful guy here. So let's have a look at these wonderful mammals. So this is the grey whale, also known as the Pacific grey whale or the Californian grey whale. Are a baleen whale that migrate between feeding and breeding grounds yearly. They used to live in the like around Europe, but their population went extinct. These guys reach about 14.9 meters or 49 feet long and weigh up to 41 tons or 90,000 pounds, and lives between 55 and 70 years. Although one female is estimated to be about 80 years old, so they're quite long-lived, like a lot of other big whales. And the common name, the grey whale, comes from the grey patches of like barnacles and stuff, and when they're molting. And they're also once called devilfish because they were very aggressive when they were being hunted. That's where they get the name the devilfish. And the sole living member of their genus, but they seem to be more closely related to other whales. They may be in the same genus as blue whales and stuff. These guys are descended from the filter-feeding whales that kind of adapted to filter feed in the Neogene, which is pretty interesting. There's kind of two populations. There's the Eastern North Pacific or North American population, and the endangered Western Pacific or Asian population. And North Atlantic populations were extinct before the European coast, before AD 500, and the American coast about the late 17th and 18th century. However, there have been sightings of grey whales in the Mediterranean Sea and even off the southern hemisphere Atlantic coast, so there's potential that there could be a few small survivors or whales migrating back into those ranges and starting up a new population there, which is pretty cool. So as I mentioned, these guys are kind of greyish with these large patches of barnacles and things, which is left by parasites, and they measure about 4.9 meters or 16 feet in length for newborns, and adults typically get 13 to 15 meters, with females being slightly larger than the males. And they have baleen, like the other baleen whales, that are able to filter through. And these guys are quite unique in this regard, as they're typically bottom feeders, so they'll typically sift mud from the bottom through their mouths and kind of get any small things and worms and stuff that are inside, so they're quite unique compared to a lot of other whales. And the North Pacific population it seems to be... and a larger population needs to be at 27,000 individuals that live around most Alaska and Baja California, so that's where they migrate from. They're the most common population that you see on like movies and things. And they seem to be growing, and they've hit a all-time low in 2010, but they seem to have been doing okay. The Western population has really suffered, but this population on the around the Northern Alaska one has been doing well, the Eastern Pacific population. The Western Pacific's doing a little harder with some conservation efforts. And there's actually believed to be a minimum of 26 females or reproductively active females in 1995. And it's been declined, and indicates they actually may be increasing, and also whales could be coming from the other side of the ocean to kind of help bolster those populations. So hopefully they're doing okay. And in terms of their pre-whaling abundance, it's estimated that the populations would have been about 76,000 to 118,000 individuals, which is about 5 times larger than the average census in 2007. And it seems that the most recent population estimate has them about 19,000 whales, and they seem to be making a good recovery in some places, but a lot of issues that plague them and other big baleen whales include things like ship strikes, getting entangled in fish gear, and changes in sea ice coverage with climate change happening. But yeah, in general, they're doing pretty okay. And as I mentioned, they feed on benthic crustaceans, which they kind of put their mouths into the bottom of the ocean, and they filter through the sediments, and they'll just filter whatever they can get through, include amphipods, things like that. Really, really interesting. And like other whales, they will kind of hang out and feed in the Arctic, and then they come down into the more areas of warmth, so like they'll come down to obviously California, places like that to breed. And yeah, just really, really cool animals. And as I mentioned, the population on the other side of the Atlantic is kind of extinct, but there have been sightings and stuff, so it seems like they're growing back in some areas. So that's really, really cool. And it's cool to see that they're at least having a recovery in a lot of areas. It's a slow road, but they hopefully will get there, and there's obviously some troubles along the way, but it's really, really cool to see them doing better. So now we're going to move on to our last, but definitely not the least whale. It's actually the second biggest whale, or the second longest whale at least. We have got the fin whale, also known as the finback whale, or the anything else whale. No, the common rock whale, or the herring whale. We've got quite a few common names. There we are. I wanted to see you guys swim. Wonderful, wonderful. Very big, if I do say so myself. These guys are really closely related to the blue whale, and they're actually the second largest whale, the second longest whale after the blue whale, with the largest recorded fin whale getting about 27.3 meters or 89.6 feet, with a maximum confirmed length of about 25.9 meters or 85 feet in length, with a maximum recorded weight as well of about 74 tons, and a maximum estimated weight of about 114 tons. And they actually were referred to by Roy Chapman Andrews as the greyhounds of the sea, because they are typically long and slender, and they can actually surpass the seas of the steamships. They were actually much faster than them, so that's pretty cool. These guys have a long and slender body with this paler underside, which is quite different from their relative, the blue whale. And there's 2 recognized subspecies, one in the North Atlantic and one in the hemisphere, and they're pretty much found in every ocean, from the poles to the tropics. And they seem to be only absent from waters with close to pack ice and the poles, which are relatively small areas of water from the open ocean. And their highest population's density occurs in cool and temperate waters, and they're quite generalist. They feed on schooling fish, squids, crustaceans, including copepods and krill. And similar to a lot of other whales. They were heavily hunted during the 20th century, and they are considered an endangered species or vulnerable. And there was believed to be about 725,000 fin whales taken from the southern hemisphere between 1905 and 1976. And as of 1977, only 38,000 survived. And the recovery of the population has been about less than 50% of their pre-whaling state by 2100, due to heavy impacts of whaling and slow recovery rates. But they are doing quite well in that regard, but also issues, as I mentioned, ship strikes, climate change, nets is also a big issue for these guys. And they actually, a little fact about these guys, they've actually been known to hybridize with fin whales. These guys are fin whales. They've been known to hybridize with blue whales and can be seen. And there've actually been a lot of evidence for these guys hybridizing with blue whales. In terms of life history, mating occurs in the winter in the low latitudes, and they have about a 12-month gestation. And they move back up to the tropics to breed, and they wean the baby about 6 to 7 months of age, and when it's about 11 to 12 meters, or 36 to 39 feet in length, and then the calf will accompany its mother back into the feeding grounds down south or north, depending on where you are. The females will reproduce every 2 to 3 years, with many as 6 fetuses being reported, but single births are more common. So it's very interesting. They may actually produce twins and things like that. Females can reach sexual maturity between 6 to 12 years and at lengths of 17 to 19 meters in the northern hemisphere and about 20 in the southern hemisphere, and they remain with their mothers for about a year before they're fully grown. Full physical maturity happens between 25 and 30 years of age, and is believed to have a maximum lifespan of about 94 years, although specimens have been found to be up to 140 years old, so quite long-lived. And they're also, as I mentioned, one of the fastest whales, and they can sustain speeds of about 37 kilometers an hour and 41 kilometers an hour, and bursts of up to 46 kilometers an hour have been recorded, where they get their name the Greyhound of the Sea. And they're actually more gregarious, or more friendly to other whales and a lot of other rock whales, and they live in groups of about 6 to 10, with feeding groups being up to 100 animals reported. And they also make these low-frequency sounds, like a lot of our whales, since they use a lot of these low-frequency sounds. They actually have up to 186 decibels. That can be quite deep, and they actually use that to kind of communicate over long distances, and really, really cool that they can use that. They don't really sing like humpback whales do, but they are able to use those to communicate and really find their way around the deep oceans. And in terms of population strengths, as I mentioned, they're doing much better. Is believed to be the population is between 50,000 and 100,000 animals in the North Atlantic pre-whaling, and now it's believed to be about 8 to 9,000 that lived in Newfoundland and stuff like that. Though the population around 1989 was believed to be about 17,000 in that area. And the total North Pacific population was believed to be 42 to 45,000 before the start of whaling. And by 1975, the estimate was between 8 to 16,000, though I believe they have been growing better and doing better. And in terms of South Pacific, they kind of been found across New Zealand and stuff like that. Also Fiji, Chile, places like that. And their population of the southern fin whale believed to be about 82,500 after whaling. And current estimates are between 15,000 and 38,000 as of 2006. There's been no estimate of current population or trends in abundance. So they seem to be doing probably about the same, if not better, just hasn't been good studies on that. And in terms of their predators, the only animal that naturally preys on them besides humans are killer whales, and there have been a few reports of pods of killer whales chasing and killing fin whales, along with blue whales as well. And like other baleen whales, they're filter feeders, so they feed on pretty much anything that's small, krill, schooling fish, copepods, things like that. Not too different from a lot of other species. And kind of just reiterating that. And conservation issues these guys face is things, because they were so much hit by whaling, a lot of their numbers are really down, but their numbers, there've been lots of big conservation efforts to put in place. And the stories of how the great whales have recovered is pretty good. For the most part, they've all been improving because of the bans on hunting and stuff like that. Really only the North Atlantic and North Pacific right whales have been really in trouble, but most of them are doing pretty well. But other things these guys can have issues with is also ship strikes and things like that.
Also, gill nets is another big issue. Something like climate change with that's been affecting a lot of whales recently. And yeah, they're just really, really beautiful animals, really beautiful. And we've got to thank Leaf and Buffsu for finally bringing these whales in. I know we had the blue whale in a while ago, but now we've got a lot of other whales coming in. And it's really cool to see these wonderful guys. I know you can't keep them in an aquarium, but they're still really cool animals to talk about. And really cool to see whale watching. I love whale watching. I've been a couple times. I love it. But yeah, thanks to Leaf and Buffsu for these 3 whales. And I think this would be a great place to end the video. So I really, really hope you guys enjoy this video. I hope you guys like and subscribe. Always remember to hit the little bell icon to get notified about anything. So yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hope you guys like and subscribe. And bye-bye.